Welcome on into the Wolverine.com podcast. Clayton Safey here with Anthony Broom. Chris Ballas not able to make it today. We are 5 days from Michigan's ReliaQuest Bowl matchup against Alabama. Transfer portal's in full swing. Christmas was yesterday. It's Thursday, December 26th. We're going to get into big transfer portal pickup for Michigan. Running back Justice Haynes from Alabama will be joining the Wolverines next year. He committed on Christmas Eve night. We'll preview Michigan against Alabama in the ReliaQuest Bowl, and we will pick college football playoff quarterfinal games at the end in our No Man Knows the Future segment. If you're excited about the Justice Haynes commitment, make sure to leave a like on this video. Hit that thumbs up button. Leave a comment as well. Subscribe to the channel. And for all your Michigan football, basketball, and recruiting coverage, head to thewolverine.com right now. Use the promo code UM1 for 2 months of premium access for just $1. Get on our message board. Get behind the paywall on all of our content over at thewolverine.com. Christmas yesterday. Hope everybody had a good one. Anthony, how was yours, and how we doing?
It's tough to look at yourself on a camera the day or so after Christmas because I just feel like a bloated carcass, a bloated husk of a human being from the excess and the consumption. But a great Christmas. I got to spend time with both sides of the family. Always a good, just to kind of just take a deep breath for a few days. As hectic as it can be, it's not nearly as hectic as tracking the transfer portal might be or tracking some of these other things. So to get that time with family, amazing. And now we kind of reset, refocus, and you'll be on a plane the next day or so. I'll be on a plane to join you guys a couple days after that, and we'll ring in the new year the way that we did last year with a football game against Alabama. So excited for it.
Yeah, first day of the year, Alabama. Last day of the year, Michigan against Alabama. Completely different teams. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. But yeah, had a great Christmas as well. Too many desserts in sight, like you said. I mean, it's tough, but yeah, you gotta battle out there. So let's get into some of the latest developments with Michigan football. It feels like another Monday. Like we did the show on Monday, then you get like Christmas Eve, Christmas, pretty much Monday again. But it's Thursday, and there has been a commitment since our show on Monday, a big one. The number one running back in the NCAA transfer portal, Justice Haynes, 5'11", 200 pounds, 2 years of eligibility remaining after spending 2 years at Alabama. Hats off to Tony Alford, Michigan running backs coach, run game coordinator, for reeling him in. He was recruiting him, and there was a high level of mutual interest when Justice Haynes was the recruit out of Buford, Georgia, a couple of years ago. He came in, visited Ohio State on multiple occasions. This time, Tony Alford recruits him to Michigan, Ohio State's arch rival. They beat out South Carolina and Ole Miss, where Haynes also visited this month. And I think that's a huge positive for Michigan, showing you can win an NIL pay-for-play battle, whatever you want to call it. So, good indication there to get a number one player at any position. I think, shows a lot about what Michigan can do in that department. He played in 25 games with 6 starts over the last 2 years, ranks 8th right now in the SEC at 5.7 yards per carry. This year in 12 games, 79 rushes for 448 yards and 7 touchdowns. He split time with Jam Miller, who is still there, will be a guy we probably talk about here in a few minutes when we talk about the game. But, Jalen Miller gets a bunch of carries at quarterback for them as well. So kind of a three-headed monster at running back this season in the regular season for Alabama. And Haynes being a significant part of that, third on the team in carries, kind of more of the change of pace, but good burst, good speed, good vision. And, we'll add some experience to a very inexperienced running back room that Michigan has next year. Ben Hall, 28 career carries. Jordan Marshall, 8 career carries. Those, the other top 2, I think, on the depth chart that you would project going into next year. We'll see, how it ends up. But nice to have some experience there, I think.
Yeah, I think the thing that excites me most about him is, going back and looking, I think we both tweeted the clip out. It's his play against Missouri this year where he kind of puts his shoulder down, almost looks like he headbutts a defender. And then, so you have the wherewithal to run with that type of power behind your pads and then outrun the defense too. I think he's a nice combination of power and speed. He's a guy that, again, I have high hopes for Jordan Marshall. I think there's something there with Ben Hall as well. But when you do the math, at the position, you're looking to add experience. You're looking to add game reps. And to a certain extent, we've seen them do that at wide receiver with Donovan McCulley. I think they're going to take another one of those guys at wide receiver to kind of bolster that as well. But, Haynes he's got a lot of experience. When you look at his first 2 years, I mean, there's still quite a bit of tread left on the tires too. He's not a guy has an abundance of carries or things like that. So, it's exciting. You wanted to come out of this portal cycle, and it's still ongoing. Again, they've got 2 more guys have 2 more days to enter, and then after January 1st, we'll see guys resuming visits, guys committing to schools and things like that. I think that'll probably move pretty quickly once we get past the new year. But to land a guy, like you said, a number 1 player at any position is huge for them. I think this fits because, while at a lot of other schools, like you're looking for your number 1 wide receiver, and don't get me wrong, I would have loved for Michigan to kind of jump in the mix for one of those guys. But when we know what Michigan wants to be offensively in terms of controlling the line of scrimmage, running the football, I think Haynes is easily, to me, slots in as one of those 2 guys in your backfield tandem. And if it's Haynes and Marshall, to me, I think that harkens back to kind of the look that you had maybe in 2021 when Hassan Haskins and Blake Corum were kind of that thunder and lightning dynamic there. So not projecting that's what it will be, but I think, and more, we'll see how these additions work out. But I'm starting to feel like maybe there is kind of a 2021 feel to maybe the way that they're trying to build this for next year, then maybe that being the springboard of into the next few years. But I like it a lot. Obviously, the caveat is there's still a lot of work to do, but in the here and now, having 8 commitments, having one of them be a number 1 guy at the position, do a hell of a lot worse than that. I think they've done a really nice job to this point.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting too. Like, it's not that loaded of a transfer portal at this point. We'll see how it develops, here in the next few weeks until it closes for every team. But even at wide receiver, it's like there aren't these total game changers hopping in. There's not a Jamison Williams going from Ohio State to Alabama, our boy with the Detroit Lions now. And to a certain extent, same thing at running back, where you have a guy who was, kind of really a backup this year, ends up being the number 1 transfer portal running back, although a good backup on, a team that was still very good, even though they went 9-3. They're held to a high standard there at Alabama. I think that the concerns when you look at Justice Haynes are, that people bring up are all the production he had when games were kind of in hand. I mean, you watch his highlights, the Missouri play that you mentioned, they're up 27-0 in the 4th quarter in that game. I think he had a couple touchdowns against Chattanooga, at least one, and several good runs against them. Some other examples of that where they're winning. And Clark Brooks, who covers the transfer portal for On3, pointed me to the stat that I'm looking at right now, where you think, 19 rushes for 239 yards and 3 touchdowns when Alabama's up 10 points or more. He led the country this year in the regular season with 12.6 yards per carry when his team's up 10 or more points. So, in 10 doesn't mean like the game's in hand or anything else, but, just goes to show you, I guess, maybe there are some concerns about what he did when games were a little bit tighter. Again, but splitting time, I think, probably has something to do with that. He was only a sophomore this year. I think that he's a really big pickup. I like the way he runs. I was impressed with him at the Rose Bowl last year. He had 4 carries for 33 yards. 2 of them, one of them went for 11. I think the other one went for 10. And he kind of added some juice there for Alabama, which didn't really have much of a run game from the running back spot late as that game went on. So I like this pickup. I think it's good to add experience like that. And he is somebody who can take his game to another level. You can talk all you want about concerns about some of these guys, but when they were underclassmen, you have to understand that guys get better. And this was a former, top 50 recruit who has been productive. It's not like he's been a nobody for 2 years. He has produced at a certain level, at Alabama on a good team.
And Tony Alford's a guy that has a pedigree of recruiting good backs and developing backs too. Even this year, I thought Donovan Edwards played some of his best football of the last few years this season, kind of under the radar because there weren't as many as those home run shots, but getting him to run a little harder. Khalil Mullings obviously had the year that he did. Saw some good things at times from the other guys, and obviously, his pedigree of developing guys at Ohio State, Notre Dame, kind of speaks for itself too. So, getting those, I can't sit here and project that Justice Haynes is going to be, a 1,200-yard rusher and be the next Hassan Haskins or Blake Corum. But it fits, a guy that has production, a guy that I think it's a pretty safe bet to be in that tandem. And it goes back to what we talked about the other day too, in terms of, especially on the offensive side of the ball, when you look at how they've approached this offseason, so much of it has just been like, let's get that floor just a little bit higher than it was with guys that have proven production, with guys who have, done it in the college level. You got a Big Ten wide receiver in Donovan McCulley. You've got a guy who's been a running back in the SEC. You've got a quarterback now in Mikey Keene who's thrown for over 8,000 yards and 65 touchdowns in his career. That's none of this to say that this is going to win them a national title or even get them back into the college football playoff next year. But these are all, it continues to kind of fall in line with the shrewd, smart, sensible football moves that you just kind of keep stacking. And, if you make enough of them, you're going to like what you get out of the team results in the aggregate. So I like it a ton. I don't know that it's game changing. Like you said, there really haven't been game changers that have entered the portal in this cycle. And Michigan hasn't just gone and say, all right, we'll take one Justice Haynes, one Max Clare, we'll get a John Mateer, we'll do this, we'll do that. No, they've just kind of gone out and got guys that are fits. And if nothing else, I think a lot of competition. And I think the floor is higher for what they can be next season. We'll see how high the ceiling is. There's a lot of off seasons still to go, but I like where they sit right now. And, this kind of, we think that Jordan Marshall's going to be a good player. But this kind of just fortifies that running back group. So you're not hoping and leaning on Jordan Marshall, and you're not hoping and leaning and crossing your fingers that Ben Hall has a breakout season. Now you've got a guy who I think is probably going to be pretty good. So that's I think that's a positive. And like you said, to start it all off, I mean, the fact that you beat out, and again, Ole Miss is not Georgia or Alabama in terms of pedigree, but they kind of rule portal season when it comes to outbidding teams and getting guys to jump on and to kind of outbid and outclass isn't the word, but to be able to step up financially to make these things happen, I think is a big step forward for them as well.
Mm-hmm. I think next up, another receiver, offensive line. Those are going to be huge. Maybe two more wide receivers. I don't necessarily agree yet that they've, increased their floor offensively, which is kind of scary because it was so low this year. I think the offensive line, unless they make some, a big pickup here, which they definitely could, you lose Hinton, you lose Preeb, you lose some of your depth so far. You don't have Colston Lovely, you don't have Khalil Mullings, but the Haynes pickup, I think, kind of offsets maybe some of what you lost in Khalil Mullings. You need playmakers. Mikey Keene, if he is the starter for Michigan next year, he's going to need some help around him. He's a shorter quarterback that doesn't really run, isn't all that mobile, doesn't do that well under pressure. What can help a guy like that out? Having weapons around him, getting the ball out, to guys and letting them make plays, having a good run game, having a good offensive line ahead of him, limiting the amount of times he's under pressure. So I still think that, hey, they're at 8 guys right now in the transfer portal that they've landed. 4 of them are on offense. I think you probably are looking at 5, 6 more offensively, and we'll see how many of those guys can impact, Michigan right away. Some of them will be projects, and that's completely fine too. But
I want to clarify something too. Like when I say the floor, I'm not comparing like the floor higher compared to what last year's team was. I'm saying relative to what they have entered the offseason with. Because we know that no Donovan Edwards, no Khalil Mullings, but Justice Haynes, raises the floor of what that room is without them. That's kind of the approach I take.
That makes sense. let's move on. Talk a little bit more about Michigan against Alabama. It'll be Tuesday at noon. There at Raymond James Stadium in Tampa Bay, or just Tampa, actually. There is a Tampa Bay, but this game in just Tampa. Before we do, let's talk about Prizepicks, our fantastic sponsor. The most fun way to enjoy watching sports is with Prizepicks, where you can win up to 100 times your money this football season. You just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projected stats, and place your entry. It's a great way to test your skills as a fan. It's simple and easy to play. You can submit your picks in less than 20 seconds. We have a special offer for you. Go to prizepicks.com or the Prizepicks app and use the code Wolverine to receive a guaranteed $50 once you play $5 in lineups. Again, go to prizepicks.com or the Prizepicks app. Use the code Wolverine to receive a guaranteed $50 when you play $5 in lineups. Thursday night football tonight, bowl games throughout the next several days, college football playoff quarterfinal games starting after Michigan's game on New Year's Eve. And then New Year's Day, you got 3 of them. So plenty of opportunities, plus the NFL down the stretch here. Plenty of chances to play Prizepicks right now. Sign up today. Get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It is guaranteed as long as you use the promo code Wolverine. It's Prizepicks daily fantasy sports made easy. Let's talk a little bit about Michigan against Alabama. Like we said, noon in Tampa on New Year's Eve. Plenty of time for us to cover the game, do our writing afterwards, and be able to make it to the champagne at midnight. Anthony, the most sad champagne I've ever had was a few years ago at Hard Rock Stadium in Miami. Michigan gets routed by Georgia, and it was a night game, so you're starting your writing, and it was the most sad thing ever. They gave everyone a little mini bottle or a little mini glass of champagne. I think it was a little mini bottle. You pour it in, and I'm sitting there after Michigan just got killed, 34-11 or whatever. I'm like, yeah, Happy New Year. But, regardless of this one, this is where I want to start with this game. Regardless of what happens, it doesn't mean this game doesn't matter, but I'm not going to watch this game, see what happens, and then draw a bunch of conclusions about what this means for this player, this coach, this team next season, for a few reasons. One, your best players aren't playing. 2, you're adding some players. We just talked about some of them, including Justice Haynes. 8 transfer commits so far, a really solid freshman class, really good freshman class coming in, led by Bryce Underwood. Like, this team's going to look so much different next year. So if Michigan loses 45-10, I'm not going to have a sad bottle of champagne. I will have a slightly, I'll be a little more energetic. But I don't think it's necessarily a referendum on anything. I don't think it means anything about what the 7-5 regular season was before that. I think that was kind of its own thing. And hopefully that the people on social media will follow suit with that after the game, no matter what happens. And I'm not saying Michigan can't win this game. Hell, maybe it would tell something if they do win it, but if they lose it, I'm not taking a ton of stock into that.
No, in a lot of ways, I feel like, and just kind of thinking how setting the expectation in terms of how I am going to react to this to a certain extent, like how we cover it. It almost kind of feels like the spring game, right? Where, like, regardless of game result, maybe you're looking at how the offensive line, like maybe a couple of the freshman offensive linemen get in there, and maybe we see, I don't know, the couple like Trey Pierce step up at defensive tackle. Like, outside of those little positional sort of takeaways, I'm not going to sit here and really draw much of anything from this game. Mm-hmm. I think it is, it is an exhibition. I think it's different than what, the bowl, a bowl trip used to be kind of a reward for what your season was and one last ride with the guys you had. And we know we've had this conversation already. Like, this, it's just not that anymore. So it's evaluation, especially for some of the younger guys, to see how they fare against an SEC team that, the name, I mean, not on the jersey, but just the name that'll be on the other sideline is still Alabama. And it's a measuring stick game. It's a progress game for, in a lot of respects. So to me, I'm not, listen, I'm going down to Tampa to watch a football game be played because They are fleeting. The season goes quick. I don't think that game result one way or another, if they win it, I don't think that necessarily means, oh, look at all the momentum they have going to the offseason now. And if they lose it, it's not, oh gosh, all the momentum they did have going into the offseason is now gone. It's just in the vacuum of bowl season, it is a game. And these two teams were put together because of television, because of the name brands, to get those eyeballs to tune in. So it's still a football game. It is still something where we can draw at least maybe a rough sketch of what this depth chart might look like heading into spring ball. But other than that, you're really just going down there to see that cool pirate ship at Raymond James Stadium and go from there. But there's not a lot for me to draw from it. I just have to be honest. And I'm not still pay attention. I'm not saying don't pay attention to our coverage. Don't watch the game, but
please do.
I don't know what else to take away from this.
So, yeah, and there'll be a lot of Michigan players not playing. Alabama, on the other hand, has everyone who hasn't portaled out is playing, including guys who will go to the NFL after this season. So that's kind of why my hypothetical was 45-10, right? It's not necessarily my prediction. We will give those on the site over at thewolverine.com before the game. I'm sure we'll talk about them on Monday's show the day before the game as well. But, that's why my hypothetical is that way, because I think Alabama, which is a 12.5-point favorite right now, has the leg up. They got all their guys going. This was a team that almost made the college football playoff this season. Michigan, it looks like Alex Orji's been practicing with the team, even though he's in the portal. So you'll have your two top quarterbacks, Davis Warren, Alex Orji, at least I assume. Donovan Edwards out. Kalel Mullings, no word on him, I would imagine, especially because he was hurt at the end of the Ohio State game. He doesn't go. You don't have your leading wide receiver in Tyler Morris. You don't have your tight end in Colston Loveland. You may not have Miles Hinton at left tackle. You won't have Mason Graham. You won't have Kenneth Grant. You won't have Josiah Stewart. You won't have Will Johnson. So that's kind of why. Alabama seems somewhat motivated coming into this game just because they did miss out on the playoff. They did lose to Michigan to end last season. The many Washington transfers they brought in with Kalen DeBoer did lose to Michigan to end last season as well in the national championship game. And I will say, if I could be the Grinch for a second, I think this Michigan defense, without the guys we just listed, KG, Mason, Will Johnson, Josiah Stewart, I think they're going to have a really tough time up front against Alabama. I think Jalen Milroe, unless he makes some big mistakes, which he easily could. He threw 3 picks in the 24-3 loss to Oklahoma this year. Unless he does that, I think he's going to have a lot of success running around, throwing the ball, making plays. It's going to be tough to cover their wide receivers. Not a deep wide receiving core. They only have 4 healthy scholarship wide receivers now after some entered the portal. But you do have Ryan Williams, 17-year-old phenom, 5-star freshman, who's been unbelievable this year. I just think this defense, and again, it won't be a referendum on Wink Martindale or what this defense is going to be, but I think they're going to have a tough time. You're looking at an Alabama offensive line with 4 starters that played against Michigan last year, that started against Michigan last year. One of them, Parker Brailsford, was the center for Washington in the CFP. 3 others coming back. 1 new starter at right tackle replaces J.C. Latham, but I think it's going to be a big challenge for this depleted Michigan defense against Alabama's offense.
Huge challenge. And it's not, because I know there are inherently people who will jump in the comments and say, oh, you guys are being negative. Like,
please
they got to go out there and play.
Yeah.
Please comment. Like, I won't read them, but please comment, because sometimes they make me sad. Yeah, and also Kenneth Grant in the draft too.
Yep.
I know there was some people holding out hope that maybe he'd come back. It seemed like maybe Michigan kind of tried, but it seemed pretty telling last week when we talked to Rayshon Benny, and he said that he thought that KG was on a beach in the Bahamas or Cancun somewhere. That seemed like a bit of an omen. So it's going to be incredibly difficult. I don't, again, could I see them conjuring up a defensive game plan to kind of keep Alabama into the mid-20s or maybe the low 30s? I could. I really question, we already know this was a team that was limited in its offensive firepower. And then it's looking like you're not going to have the guys that made up most of your production on what was one of the, I mean, am I overstating it by saying maybe one of the 10 worst offenses in college football this year? 15, whatever.
Yeah.
So right now, I mean, I haven't put in a staff pick yet. My gut says something like 27-10 Alabama. And again, I'm not putting a whole lot into the game result here. I want to see what they have, especially some of the young guys that they have that will be thrust into these bigger roles next year. And because it's an Alabama team that I think I could be wrong, but they're pretty young too. Or was this a team kind of cobbled together with portal guys? I'm not 100% sure, but just go out there, compete. Go out there, compete, see what happens. Hey, maybe you can win a bar fight like you did in Columbus. Although I think it would have to look a lot different than that, just because you don't have that game-wrecking defensive line that will be out there. But I struggled to kind of find a path for Michigan to not only win this game, but keep it within a couple scores, which is kind of disappointing. And to a certain extent, I don't want to say it feels like a death march. It just kind of feels like a crawl to an inevitable result. But we'll see what happens from there.
Yeah. But I agree. I do think that's the thing. Like the heroics we saw against Ohio State, it's just not the same Michigan team. And of course they'll get dragged if they do lose big, from people who want them to lose, but it's not.
Well, if they lose, it won't be people who want them to lose. It'll be Michigan fans too.
Well, some, yeah. I mean, I agree. But again, it's just not the team that was built to play this 2024 season, unfortunately. Milroe, very up and down year for Alabama, completing 65.9% of his passes, only 15 touchdowns, 10 picks. He threw 6 of his 10 picks in the team's losses. Again, they scored 3 points against Oklahoma. He had 3 picks. He was one of the big issues. So if he makes some mistakes against a Michigan secondary that's largely intact from what it was at the end of the season, because you didn't have Will Johnson anyway, then I think it opens the door for Michigan here. You got to win the field position battle, all that, all the prerequisites that this team has had all year, things they did against Ohio State that led to them pulling off the victory against a very quality opponent. He's, Milroe's their leading rusher this year. On the other side of the ball, I think those 2 linebackers that come back that are pretty high NFL draft prospects, Deontay Lawson and Jahad Campbell, are lucky, or at least, glad that Tyler Morris won't be suiting up on the other side, because he ran past the entire defense in the Rose Bowl last year. Very, very solid defense, not a great defense, doesn't have those elite playmakers that you are used to seeing from Alabama. Even that we saw last year with Dallas Turner coming off the edge, guys like that, Chris Braswell, Damani Jackson starting at corner, Keon Sabb, former Michigan safety, starting at safety. So it's a very solid defense, but at the same time, when you look at Michigan's offense, you can get by one game maybe without Colston Loveland and win, but another, I guess they are 2-0 without him this year, but no Loveland, probably no Mullings, no Edwards, maybe no Hinton. It's very, very tough to see them putting up many points. I believe Vegas has their over-under for total points, Michigan offense, at 14.5 right now. I think that's about accurate. I don't know that I would even take the over, though, on that.
I would probably take the under. Like I said, like 13 points feels right. 10, 13, somewhere in that range. Maybe another way to frame it is, instead of lamenting who is not going to be out there, I mean, maybe some of the guys that will have an opportunity in those spots, like Colston Loveland, his absence is going to lend itself to, a bigger showcase for guys like Marlon Klein, Logan Hansen, who, when you miss out on, they were in on Max Clare goes to Ohio State. Now it's this room full of guys that, I mean, I think that's a position group where you can kind of weather that storm for next season. And I think I would think Klein and Hansen are your top 2 heading into next year. So we get to see what those guys look like in an expanded role. We've seen that for a few games this year, but the backfield rotation, let's see what Jordan Marshall and Ben Hall can do. Let's see, maybe we'll see what Andrew Sprague is able to do, at one of the tackle spots. So to me, I think that's where most of the intrigue comes from. Is not that, not going into the game and, kind of sulking about who's there and who's not there, who's opted out. But I want to see how the guys that step into those vacated roles fare, because there's a lot of production and a lot of star power that they are going to have to replace next season. And some of it's going to have to come on the margins from being better in different areas. But, I want to see how the next in line at tight end looks. I want to see someone step up at wide receiver, maybe a guy like a freshman and Channing Goodwin, who the staff thinks very highly of. Maybe we see him get some run in a game like this. Would love to see a guy like Fred Moore, who I still think highly of, have a good game, put some good stuff on film against a solid Alabama defense. So for me, on both sides of the ball, that's where I'm intrigued, and that's what I'm excited for, is to see, there's some guys you need to replace probably via the portal, but how much of that production can you replace with what you have? And regardless of game result, just to kind of see what that pecking order looks like, that's what provides the most intrigue for me heading into this game.
I just hope the offensive line can hold up enough to, make sure run plays aren't being blown up, where we can see Benjamin Hall and Jordan Marshall have a little bit of success, where we can see Davis Warren get the protection he needs. That you can't have a game like the Indiana game where he was under pressure on 64% of his dropbacks, and you just can't get anything going offensively when you do that. So that would be my biggest concern, I guess, is the line, especially if Hinton doesn't play. But yeah, we'll see how Michigan holds up in this game. We'll have coverage from Tampa. So head to the Wolverine.com throughout the weekend and leading into Tuesday's game. Ring in the new year with us over there using the promo code UM1 for 2 months of premium access for just $1. Let's make some picks and get out of here. We'll pick the college football playoff quarterfinal games, in our final segment, No Man Knows the Future. But before we do, we got to talk about our friends over at Gametime, the exclusive ticketing partner of the Wolverine podcast. The easiest way to get tickets to the biggest games, concerts, or shows. The app is super easy to use. See the picture of what your seats could look like, depending on which ones you're shopping for the next concert, show, game that you're going to. If you're heading to the ReliaQuest Bowl to see Michigan, head to Gametime. You can use the promo code ON3 for $20 off your first purchase. I believe it's 20, right? Yes, $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. You can also get Michigan basketball tickets there. Michigan basketball wrapping up the non-conference slate on Sunday with a game against Western Kentucky at Chrysler. Again, promo code is ON3 for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. What time is it? Game time. 4 games that we have heading into New Year's Eve. We got the one Fiesta Bowl, and then 3 games on New Year's Day. It's going to be fun to watch. Even though there are a lot of blowouts, I enjoyed the first round games. I know you probably did too, Anthony. Let's start with the Fiesta Bowl on New Year's Eve. Penn State against Boise State. Penn State, an 11-point favorite. Over-under is 52.5, 7:30 on December 31st. I'm going to go Penn State in this one. Boise's played a lot of 1-2 score games against a weaker schedule. Ashton Jeanty could absolutely just take over this game and have a legendary performance. And as I think you're probably going to say as well, the Fiesta Bowl is a place where Boise just has some magic. But my head says that even though they have James Franklin, they just have a little bit too much for Boise State in this game.
My picks, I had 0 pulse on any of the picks last week. So whatever I say, you probably want to fade it if you are going to bet these games. I just have a feeling about Boise State. I don't know. I was a little more confident in it last week, but I don't know if they'll win, but I do think they'll cover. I think Ashton Jeanty will play some hero ball, but Penn State probably takes advantage and wins the game of the lower half of the bracket that, now that Carson Beck is out for the playoffs, seems like is up for grabs. So we'll see. But I do have Boise State covering in this game.
Okay, I like it. Peach Bowl. This one, 1:00 on New Year's Day. Texas against Arizona State. Texas, a 13.5-point favorite, largest spread of this round. Over-under is 52. I've got Arizona State keeping it close. Texas was in, as much as we said, you could say all four of those games weren't necessarily close in the first round. Texas was in the most competitive game. Clemson had it a one-score game. They were down at the goal line again, turned it over on downs to make it a one-score game again after Jaden Blue had a long touchdown. That was a competitive game. You felt like Texas was in control the whole way, but they left the door open a little bit. I think Arizona can cover this 13.5, although I would be a little more comfortable if it was 14 or 14.5. That maybe I'd play it there.
If I were betting this game, I would take the over. I think we're in for a shootout in this one.
That'd be fun.
I'm going to go with Arizona State to cover. Texas wins. Similarly to the Boise State game, I would love to see some Bo Scatabo heroics in this game. I love how that dude runs. This will be much closer than 13.5. At least I hope. Be a good way to start New Year's Day with some fireworks.
I agree. Get us all excited for the Rose Bowl, 5 p.m. Eastern time. Ohio State against Oregon. Ohio State 2.5-point favorite in the rematch. Over-under is 55. Oregon won by 1 point in Eugene earlier this season. Will Howard, beautiful slide technique was on point, but no time left for Ohio State. I do think Ohio State gets them here in the second game, neutral site. Be on the West Coast, could favor Oregon a little bit, but I do have Ohio State winning and covering this small number, 2.5.
This is interesting. I'm going to go reluctantly with Oregon just because I don't know. I mean, credit to Ohio State. I mean, they came out and realized what they were, and it helped that Tennessee had a terrible game plan. I think this will be a lot like the game that they played on October 12th. My gut says Ohio State, but I can't pick it here. I'm going to go with Oregon reluctantly.
Okay. Sugar Bowl, final one. This may be, I guess Ohio State, Oregon, same boat. I mean, these games are going to be potentially epic. Notre Dame against Georgia. Georgia's a 2-point favorite. Over-under is 44. I think a lot of people are surprised by this line that Georgia is a 2-point favorite. They got Gunnar Stockton starting at quarterback. Starter Carson Beck out for the college football playoff. I've got Notre Dame. They're playing good football. I know the strength of schedule wasn't very good during the regular season. They have the loss to Northern Illinois, but feels like a different team. Feels like they know what they are. They're a running football team. Riley Leonard can put the ball on the ground and move the football for this offense. I've got Notre Dame winning, but and they got pretty good odds. I think they're a decent value actually to win the whole thing.
I would agree with that. I will go with Notre Dame. I think so much of it this time of year comes down to if you have the better quarterback or if you have a good enough quarterback. At Georgia, it didn't seem like they trusted Gunnar Stockton to throw when he played in that SEC championship game. So for me, I'm going to go with Notre Dame. And I also think this is a candidate for the under as well. I could see this being a rock fight, like 17-13, 20-16, something like that.
I like that.
That's my pick there.
Gunnar Stockton, perfect name for a Georgia quarterback as well. Yeah, he's 25 of 32 this year, 206 yards, 1 pick. I imagine a lot of that is in garbage time. I'll look at his game logs here. Yeah, a lot of those come against UMass and Tennessee Tech. So not much to go on when it comes to
Kirby. He's almost like his former boss, where he finds a way. You chew on the rat poison, and he finds a way. Somehow that program finds a way to find a chip on its shoulder, which I guess it's how you stay great and stay on top. So we'll see what happens. Everyone
thought they're going to go in and lose to Texas, and it's like, okay, nope. Texas, welcome to the SEC, and now they've beaten them twice. Of course, you had Beck, but Beck didn't play particularly well a lot of the time in those two matchups, especially the first one. You still got the win. So, yeah, there's still a ton of talent on that Georgia team. Notre Dame has a lot of talent too, sneakily, but we'll see. I'm excited for this game, maybe more than any of them. We'll be watching.
I suspect all of these games will be a little more entertaining than the first round.
I agree. It's gonna be good, especially you got Michigan, and then you move on to these playoff games, and Should be a good few days here. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, everybody here from the Wolverine. We'll be back on Monday with the show from Tampa, but before then, head to thewolverine.com, use the promo code UM1 for 2 months of premium access for just $1. Like the video if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to our channel, and again, we'll see everyone Monday from sunny Florida.